This is gonna hurt. It's time for the Suffering Podcast.
A true warrior will continue to fight, even when the battle in front of them seems hopeless. Getting driven back time after time, wondering if there's a bullet that has their name. Finding that courage to stay and sacrifice until the bitter end. Finally, one swing advances your position enough to give you hope. You see there is a slim possibility where victory could be snatched from the jaws of defeat. This refreshing glimmer reinvigorates your soul and keeps you moving forward. One small win leads to another, and before you know it, you're making progress. You're fighting back and beginning to change the odds. Winning never found anyone who quit early in the game. I'm Kevin Donaldson here with Mike Failace, and welcome to the Suffering Podcast. If you're a fan of overcoming adversity and overcoming suffering, then we're for you, because that's what we do here, and that's the stories that we highlight. So do me a favor, hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, please comment, ring the bell to get notified of all of our new content. Now you can join. Follow us on all social media so you can find out what we're up to. On this episode of the Suffering Podcast, we have another traveler coming in, Seth Gehle, to discuss the suffering of fighting back. Now, you fought this war, but the main thing I like about your story is you never gave up.
Resiliency.
And we're going to get into that in just a minute. Before we do, let's throw a big shout out to our marquee sponsor. That's Toyota of Hackensack. As podcasters, I'm going to change it up. As podcasters, not police, we don't trust anybody, but we do trust Toyota Hackensack. So go see the boys over there. Go to toyotahackensack.com. Let them find you.
Well, Kev, as podcasters, we can't trust anybody.
Yeah, we can't.
A lot of people... it's funny. I'm looking at the microphone. It says blue right on the microphone.
Yeah, I know. It's you got to be careful what you say anymore. But anyway,
exactly.
So Seth, you've watched a couple of our episodes.
Yep.
We take a question from our audience every week. This week's social media question comes from Keisha52. What is your favorite book, and why is it your favorite book? More importantly.
Yeah, so my favorite book is probably Relentless by Tim Grover.
That's a great book.
Yep. So if you're not familiar with it, I think there's the 13 reasons or the 13 chapters or whatever it is of what separates guys like Michael Jordan, Kobe, and Dwayne Wade from everybody else. And he talks about several others, but Michael Jordan's a key one. And just reading that book, you can understand the mindset that Michael Jordan had to do what he did. And it's so applicable. Anybody can apply that. And when I read it, not to sound arrogant or anything, but I feel a lot of that in myself. The way that he talks about Michael Jordan and the way he handled things, I feel like I just have a relentless mindset.
One of my favorite parts of that book was when he got comfortable with Tim Grover, Michael Jordan said, I'm going to pay you enough so you don't train anybody else.
Yep.
And that was a smart move, right?
Yep.
That was a smart move. Mike, what do you think?
I'm going to go with Totem. First of all, it's a friend of ours, Joe Lachlan, with Shots Fired.
Shots Fired, yeah.
Shots Fired. Shots Fired book was one of the best books I ever read. He talks to a lot of people that were involved in fatal shootings and all that, and officers that were involved in fatal shootings, and gets their perspective of what they were feeling and everything else. If I read that book before my shooting, I'm not saying I would have been okay, but the turnout would have been different. The other one is a book called Live Like Sean. It's written by a guy by the name of T.J. Nelligan. Sean was a Special Olympics athlete, and Sean loved everybody. And Sean wanted to pass away at a young age. And T.J., his father, looked back on Sean's life and said, because Sean loved everybody, treated everybody with respect. Although he was a Special Olympics athlete, taught everybody with respect. And he goes, why don't we all just live like Sean? And I mean, that really resonated with whatever's going on in your life. Just love everybody.
I just watched Champions. It's one of my favorite movies.
It's one of my greatest movies ever.
When he gets the guy in the shower, it's my funniest thing. It's the funniest thing ever because the guy smells. I don't know if you ever watched that movie.
No,
Champions is a great movie.
I got a lot of them. There's a lot of books that I enjoy. It Can't Hurt Me, Extreme Ownership. Breathe by James Nestor is one of my favorite ones because it changed my perspective. Chaos by it's about Charles Manson in the 60s. I enjoy getting engulfed in these stories, and I'll go down these rabbit holes of different things. But ultimately, my favorite book, and it's going to sound weird, my favorite book is the Bible.
I thought you were going to say Cat in the Hat.
The Cat in the Hat. The Bible is one of those books where I could read it 10,000 times, and I always pull something new out of it. Specifically, so I'm a big fan of Samuel's 1 and 2 and Kings. I love King David. I love the stories of how he came to power and how Samuel blessed him and God blessed him and stuff. But here's what I grabbed from the Bible in the King David stories. David was just a man. He had his faults. He had his fallibilities. But he did some amazing things. Read Psalm 23 and you'll understand how amazing David was. But he did all these things wrong. But he was still capable of these wonderful things in his life. And I kind of see myself in that. And I'm not David. I'm not King David. But
Kevin.
I am a very fallible man. I have a lot of faults in me. But that doesn't mean that I can't still do great things in my life. So Keisha, 52, thank you very much for sending that question in. Keep sending in your questions, and we will try to get them on the air.
When are you going to start doing great things in your life, though?
I don't know. Listen, there's always the potential. That's it. It's all about potential.
Keep that door open.
Yeah, it's always about potential. You never close the door. But like you, I never stop fighting. You know, if there's something that I want in this world, I'm going to fight tooth and nail in order to get it. And that's what I admire about you. I really appreciate you coming all this way to come sit down with us.
From the ATL.
From the ATL.
Yeah, man, Atlanta.
That's a second person that we've had up here.
When we get Seth talking a little bit, you'll start hearing that little drawl.
Yeah.
Little drawl.
He hasn't been in New Jersey long enough to get our accent down yet. We should have brought the Palm in so we could compare Atlanta accents and Hoboken accents.
We would translate for you. Don't worry about it. Because it's English, but it's like not really English. So you left this morning, and I watch a lot of your social media. I watch what you're going through, what you're doing. Watch some shows that you've been on, and you do have an amazing story. So why don't you tell our audience a little bit about how you grew up? Let's start there.
Yeah, so it kicks off pretty quick. My mom had me and my two sisters real early. I think like 16, 17, 18, 17, 18, 19. We're all born back-to-back years.
You Irish twins?
Yeah, they were born like...
Do you know what Irish twins are?
No.
You're 9 months to a year apart.
Yeah, okay, yes. That's what we are.
They were born 3 months apart.
Yeah.
So we were born back-to-back, and my father basically, my mom and my dad were like incompatible. They're two hotheads, and my mom likes to push buttons. My dad he's just got anger issues, really, really bad, and he's an alcoholic. So the story is when I was around like 1 or 2, they get into a fight, and he ends up stabbing her behind the ear and nearly killing her. And so he would go to prison. So I have pictures of me and my dad from being a baby, but you don't remember that. So I never knew him growing up. That's pretty much how it kicks off, right? And because of that, my mom was taking care of 3 kids. And as I've talked more of my story and kind of processed more and more of it over the last like 3 months, I've kind of come to realize that she was probably not making the best decisions. I think I gave her a little bit too much grace. And not that I'm going to attack at this point, but just to admit that she was probably making not great decisions, because there was a lot of times where we were living with random people, friends, family, babysitters. And when you have kids that are subjected to just random households, I've never known what a house was like, or what a family's like, I don't have never known what it's like to come home and smell like spaghetti and garlic bread, like in the oven. And you come home and mom and dad are there and they're cooking, and it's just like this big family ordeal. Never happened for me.
So it was no like 2.5 kids in a white picket fence? And,
no. Yeah, nothing. So, as far back as I can remember, it was just mom and me and my sisters, and we took care of ourselves. We raised ourselves.
Well, was your mother doing the best that she could, or you think she was actively, she was a kid. She was a kid playing adult.
She was a kid having kids.
And I'm not making excuses
Right.
for your mom. I'm not. Yep. I don't know your mother. But I'm trying to look at the circumstances surrounding it.
So that's how I've always looked at it, right? Is that she probably was doing the best that she could, and that is probably true. With that being said, since I've been a father, I can't imagine making the mistakes that she made that would put us in jeopardy and things like that, right? And what I mean by that is it's just buying things, not understanding, like, at some point in your life you have to grow up, and at some point you have to like say, okay, this shit's like, I'm done with this shit, and I'm going to fix my money problems. I'm going to fix this, fix that, and everything's going to be good. And she never did. So we always had money. We were always on welfare. We always had money problems. We moved a lot as young kids. And like I said, there's many times where I would be at a random person's house or friend or babysitter. We were basically living with them. And when you're that young, and like I said, you don't have a stable home life. Well, that was the first time I was molested. I was at 5 years old. I had a babysitter. One of their kids was a teenager at the time, ended up molesting me. This only happened a few times. It wasn't anything serious. I think it was more of like him exposing himself to me in bed.
I was going to say a few times wasn't anything serious.
So there's degrees.
One time is
it is. One time is more than enough. But
right.
I understand what you're saying.
I know where you're coming from. But.
There's levels.
Yep.
You know, it's the exposing. It maybe having you watch something inappropriate, which is not right, but it's not as bad as the actual physical contact type of molestation.
Yeah, and I remember, I don't remember much. It's more like a very distant dream because I was only like about 4 or 5 years old, and I know that it happened because I know I did report it to my grandparents. We'd go see my grandparents, and I told them, and so I know they tried to help us with CPS. Unfortunately, their hands are pretty much tied. You can know a child is getting abused, and if you don't have like substantial evidence, it seems like you can't do anything about it. Unfortunately, I don't know all the legalities of it, but I know CPS was involved for a long time. Nothing ever happened. Anyways, that kid would end up going to prison later in life for raping the girl next door. So he was kind of he would end up being a serial abuser or whatever you want to call it. But that was the first time that I got molested, and I don't know how much it impacted me at that time. I was so young. But moving on from there, I mean, it was just, like I said, live with mom. She would work all day. We would be at home. We'd do the laundry, dishes. We raise ourselves. And that went on pretty regularly for several years. She dated many guys. She always had new boyfriends. They always drank and smoked. So drinking and smoking weed was not a big deal to us. Although 20 years ago, smoking weed was like,
Well, what years are we talking about here?
Like I was like 5, 6, 7.
But what's the year?
Like 90. 99, 2000.
So the reason I asked that is that type of behavior was much more acceptable that your mom was exhibiting in, say, the 60s and 70s. Everybody smoked, everybody drank. That was kind of a social thing.
It was like the Woodstock era.
Right. So when you get into the 90s, things are a lot different. The warnings. I remember very clearly when they started putting warnings on cigarette packs. Like, it was the stupidest thing in the world. This may kill you. Yeah. Like, no shit.
This may cause cancer.
And, you shouldn't smoke around kids.
Nicotine is addicting.
No shit. But if it did happen in the 60s and 70s, it's not that it makes it any different. Because when I was growing up, my parents both smoked. And I remember asking my grandfather this, and I said, because he smoked in the war, in World War II, and I said, yeah, but Grandpa, you didn't know. Like, you didn't know. And he goes, we knew. Everybody knew that you weren't supposed to be doing this. It wasn't healthy for you. And to do it around children, especially weed and stuff like that.
What do you smoke the unfiltered Camels back in the day, too?
Yeah.
Well,
not that the filter does anything for you.
Yeah. It's interesting to hear you say that because I don't know what the 90s were like. I was growing up in the 90s, so I don't know what that perspective looked like from the outside in. But when the smoking, she would smoke cigarettes, weed, and then just drinking. And like I said, there was always guys in the house, just different boyfriends all the time. I never, none of them were ever a father figure. They were just there for my mom,
So is your mom good looking? Is that like she had multiple?
She's from Atlanta. Come on.
It's
Southern girls.
Well, there's two ways it could go.
I was born and raised in Ohio, so
there's two ways it could go. Either she's please no disrespect here.
Yeah.
She could be a train wreck and just she's one of these types of girls who always hangs around,
latching on to people.
Right. Or she could be extremely good looking and always attracted, but she has a taste in men that doesn't sound like it's really good.
Right. And I don't know. I mean, there's a million ways you could spin that. I think possibly she has 3 kids, so she gets a big welfare check. That's a big thing, right? So I don't know. I don't know, man. I don't know why all these guys were doing this.
Is she still with us?
My mom?
Yeah.
Yes.
Do you still talk to her today?
No.
Did you ever?
Yeah. You disconnected. Okay.
Yeah, I told her a few months ago. I said, hey, like I'm gonna start telling my story because it needs to be told. And I said, I'm not doing this to dime anybody out. I'm just gonna tell my story, how I view it. And even in my book that'll be out later this year, I put in my book that this is not for me to take anybody and drag them under the bus.
You're not looking for justice.
Right, exactly. I'm not looking for justice. I'm telling you the point of view from a 5-year-old, a 8-year-old, a 10-year-old, whatever I can remember.
And that's a big thing because it's not a gotcha type of thing.
Yep.
Like I said, you're not looking for justice. You're looking for healing.
Right.
It's not like an aha.
Exactly.
You know, I got you.
Yeah.
You know, it's just getting your story out to help other people.
Exactly. Yep. And so by the time I was like 8, 9, 10 years old, right around that time frame, my mom started getting like it was like a lot of smoking, a lot of drinking, like a lot more. And it got to the point where she was smoking weed with my sisters. And at that point we're riding bikes and we're gone until the street lights come on, and we're kind of, growing up a little bit. We lived in a house where she would basically be gone all night and she would be home during the day. So at 7, 8 o'clock at night, she would leave to go to work. She worked 12-hour shifts at a factory. Once again, this is kind of where I start to think to myself, like, would I ever leave my kids alone at home for 12 hours every night with no, like, it's not like today where I can just pick you up and call you, you know?
Yeah, exactly.
It's completely different. You have to call the factory, ask for a Barb or whatever, and get her on the phone, So she would leave, and there was twice that our house got broken into, both, 3 times. 2 times I was there. And, I mean, being like 8, 9 years old and watching your back door get kicked in by 3 guys is horrifying.
Oh, sure.
And like even today, like I'm terrified of the dark. I'm deathly terrified of the dark. If I hear anything in my house, like the damn ice making at 2 o'clock in the morning, dude, I'm just like, I can't go to sleep, man. Like if my alarm system's not set and I hear something, I can't sleep. Like I'm just like, I can feel my skin crawling. But it's because you see these kind of things at a young age, and it jacks you up.
So that's, I
Leaves
guarantee.
an indelible ink on you for the rest of your life.
So Michael attests to this. We have the burden of knowledge, being police officers. We have the burden of knowledge. We've seen what people do, how they do it, and why they do it. And when you go to bed at night, I guarantee you are aware of your surroundings.
There was a period in my life, and this is long after I became a cop, before my incident and all that stuff, I had to check every window on the first floor.
Yep.
Check every window, make sure the windows were locked before I went to bed every night.
When I first met my wife, she would think nothing about leaving her purse on the front seat. I'm like, what are you doing? Like, you can't do that. She's like, oh, nobody's going to touch it. I'm like, no, they are. They're going to smash your window, and yeah, nobody will get hurt, but you're going to have to replace the window because you're aware of that stuff.
And your identity and all that stuff.
Correct. So you have the burden of knowledge, and that's what hurts the worst, especially as a young kid.
Yeah, man, that's actually, I've not thought about it like that, the knowledge, but yes, and it's...
But you get the burden of knowledge through experience.
Right, which is, I talk about that in my book, and that's one of the messages I talk about when I do talk to people about perspective, is you gain perspective through storytelling or experience. And unfortunately, I was born into mine. I didn't go out and seek it, And I think that can mess you up sometimes, because even looking at my kids, I know what people will do to kids, right? And so sometimes when I'm loving my kids, I'm like, oh my God, man. Like, how could you ever hurt this freaking soul? Like it's hard.
How could you hurt one of God's creatures like this?
I don't understand it, and not that you should, but you're right. The burden of knowledge, that domain of experience that you have, it will mess you up. And so we lived in this house and break-ins were happening. And like I said, I was like 9 or 10 when that happened. But at the same time, I met this kid who lived a couple houses down. He lived like right around the corner from me. And he was like 5 years older than me. And I always had a thing for hanging out with older kids, just slightly older boys that were just kind of bigger. I was a very small kid. I got into a lot of fights, but I always had like a big friend that could protect me. And so that's kind of what this kid became. And he became my best friend. He knew that I had a jacked up life at home, and he started to help me out. Because this is, like I said, my mom was smoking a lot, but she also started getting abusive and close hand punching, beating the shit out of me and my sisters. And then just with no remorse. And we always got our asses whipped growing up, which is not a big deal. I whip my kids, and they're 5 and 3. I don't think it's a big deal. But there's a lesson to be learned with me and my children, and I love them, right? And I'm not like beating them out of anger. There's no emotion attached to it. It's a correction or discipline, whatever you want to call it. But my mom, she would, when you're close hand punching your daughter in the mouth when she's 11 years old, I mean, there's a problem there. Yeah. And there was a time where she beat the shit out of me for walking home from school. I deserved an ass whooping, absolutely. But after she was done, I was laying on the floor. She had just hit me in the back, across the back with this 2x4 several times. And
Several times.
yeah, well,
He
yeah,
says it like nonchalant. Several times.
yeah, yeah. It was she beat the hell out of me with that thing. I mean, it probably like maybe I don't know 5-6 times. And as I remember falling to the floor on my knees, screaming and crying. And I remember her looking at me like, "Get the fuck." She literally says like, "Get the fuck up, get out of here, go to your room." And when you don't have a father, that's already tough at that point, and then your mother's doing that to you. So you look for outlets, right? And so I would go and hang out with my friend who's older than me. And one day I'm over there, and he's like, "Hey, I got this buddy who's coming to pick me up. Whatever, we play video games." I said, "Okay, cool." I loved playing video games as a kid. So this guy walks in the front door. He's 6'5", 380 pounds, big Hispanic guy. He's very pale though. You can tell he's Hispanic, but he's very like white colored. And he's got the big like Dahmer style serial killer glasses on. Yeah.
Clue number one.
Yeah.
Someone you look out for today, but when you're that young, you don't realize what you're looking out for.
Dude, I was clueless. And so he's got his hair slicked back. And he walks in and he's just this like massive guy. And he's got I actually remember his shirts were so big he had to custom order t-shirts. There's a company back in the day, I don't know if they're still around, but it's called Big Ass Tees. They make shirts that are like bigger than like 5XL.
Wow.
This guy's massive. And he didn't look like a slob. Like he looked very capable. He was certainly obese, but he looks like he punches hard. Like that's kind of how I always describe him. And like
He looks like he could hurt you.
Yeah, yes. And so like he walks in, but he's like super friendly, smiling. I'm like, okay, whatever. He's like, "Hey, what's your name?" Boom, Seth. "Okay, do you like playing video games?" "Yeah." "Do you like football?" "Yep, love football. Ohio State Buckeyes, Cleveland Browns, whatever." "Cool. Well, do you want to come up and play video games with us?" "Sure. Let me go ask my mom." So I go home real quick, ask mom, "Can I go up to this guy's house?" She's kind of like questioning me about it. And I said, "Well, my friend Jacob goes all the time. I'll be with Jacob." And she's like, "Okay, that's fine." That was the end of the discussion.
But I want to pose a question to you. I want to just step back for something.
Yep.
You did something and you said I deserved an ass whooping.
Yep.
Did you really? Think about this? Because in my opinion, ass whoopings, I had enough of them. Ass whoopings don't mean anything. They don't do anything. They don't correct anything. Every time I got my ass whooped, I just started to learn that, well, if I'm going to get my ass whooped, I might as well do it anyway, because I'm going to be guilty of it. So my opinion is, you didn't. You needed to be corrected in whatever form or fashion, but you didn't need an ass whooping. So I don't. That's what I grabbed
not with a
onto.
2x4 anyway.
No, that's something old. That's a whole.
Yeah,
it
was a paddle, 2x4. People nowadays don't know what it means. Like what the paddles look like back. There's a 2x4 carved in with a handle, and it had some holes in there designed for giving good ass whoopings.
Mm-hmm.
Good little.
Listen, we caught a good belt across the ass.
Yeah, belts.
Never got paddled in my life. What do they call it? A switch?
Switch.
Yeah.
Well, so my uncles and my grandfather used to get hit with a switch, and he used to make the kids go pick them out himself.
Yep.
And if it was
pick something out that I'm gonna beat your ass with.
If it was too thin, it was no good. If it was too thick, it was no good because there's too much surface area.
Yep.
So it had to be just right.
Oh yeah. Many nights. Halloween especially. You start acting up on Halloween. You grab one of those bare trees, take that thing off, start. But
I just don't think they do what they're intended to do. You're trying to correct behavior, and I'm not knocking anybody's parenting style, but that's my opinion.
Listen, phone books don't leave marks.
Yeah.
Put it.
So I'm able to do the look.
Sure. Yeah. And that's a whole other conversation. I think the way I handle it with my kids, it's I'm not beating the shit out of my 3-year-old and 5-year-old. It's like hey, we don't do that, and then it works for me. But nonetheless, like you said, I don't care how anybody parents. I think that children need to know what's right and wrong. They need to understand consequence, things like that. The reason why I say I deserved an ass whooping was just because of the situation. I walked home. I usually ride bus, and so I got home like 2 or 3 hours late. And it's funny you asked that because my mom wasn't mad at me for walking home or whatever. She was just mad about the inconvenience of the situation. And it wasn't even like, "Where's my son?" It was like, "Where the fuck is my son?" And as soon as I got in the house, "Get upstairs." I'm like, so that's what really made it bad. And, like I said, when I saw her punch my sister in the mouth like multiple times and she's like beating her head against the wall, my mom would she had these long nails. She would grab us. I remember she grabbed me by the face one time and just because she had these nails and she knew it. And she would grab you and just right in your face. And I remember I talk about it in my book again. where like she's like bouncing my head against the wall, and I can smell her breath because she smokes and drinks, and I can just like smell it hit me in the face, and she's yelling at me, and this the spittle's coming out, smacking you. It's just that shit's terrifying when you're a little kid, man. It just
So you go into this. You're going to go play video games with this. I'm assuming you're talking about Armando Vazquez.
That's right.
Yes. Probably seems alluring. Hey, an adult's gonna let me go play video games at their house. It's kind of cool.
Yep. I remember going
and show me some love and interest.
Yeah, dude. I mean, we go up to his house on the way there. He drove this like little like Honda Civic. We listened to Metallica, like AC/DC, full blast air conditioning in the car, which I'd never had. So like these like little things I remember were just like, hell yeah, dude. Like this is awesome.
I made it.
Yeah, exactly, dude. I'm like, dude, this is sick. We get to his house. There's like 3 TVs, 2 computers. There's a big table like this in the middle of the. He has this like studio apartment. There's one big room, with a kitchenette right in the back, and a bathroom. But it's just one big room, and so you walk in. It's like I said, 3 TVs, couple computers, big table for. We played D&D, Dungeons and Dragons as well, like role playing stuff. And so I'm like, dude, this is freaking awesome. Drinking coffee, pop, eating all the pizza you want.
It's a kid toucher's paradise.
Yeah, dude. Yeah.
It's a grooming paradise.
It is. Yeah, it was. That guy had the fucking playbook. He probably wrote the playbook, as a matter of fact. The guy actually ran a haunted house in that town of Bluffton, Ohio. That town has 4,000 people in that town. So I don't know, maybe 1,000 kids, 1,500 kids. And I've actually gone back and messaged people from that town and asked them if they remember this haunted house, and they're like, yeah, we do. We loved it every year. And I would help the guy run it. But at his mom's house on Main Street, she lived in a Victorian-style house. She had like a wraparound porch. We'd set up a haunted house. Every single kid in that town would come through that haunted house, and he was always at the end handing out candy. He
was checking out the merchandise.
Yeah,
Yep.
exactly.
Yep. So we go up to his house, and basically at 10 years old, I start hanging out with this man essentially every weekend of my life. Like this is like freaking golden, dude. Like, oh my God. Video games, pizza, pop, you name it, whatever. Great time. All the best video games, all the newest video games. Great time.
You finally felt like you felt love. Like someone cared about you.
Yeah. It was like you could just relax. Like when you went up there, you could just like kick your feet up, and nobody's gonna get mad at you. Nobody's gonna
Judge
upset.
you.
Yeah, nothing was like wrong, and I couldn't do anything wrong. I could do whatever the hell I wanted, and I was never in trouble.
Probably curse.
Yeah,
Say whatever you want.
Yeah, dude. Yeah, that's one of the funny things I talk about is like, yeah, I could cuss all I wanted, and nobody cared. We could watch whatever we wanted. Nobody cared. So it was awesome, and I would continue to hang out with him every single weekend. Like shit, you not. If there's 52 weekends in a year, I was there 40 to 45 of them, and as I started hanging out with him, my mom got worse and worse, right? So I try to explain this to people so they understand. Monday through Friday, I was living on one side of the street, right? Mom, she's getting into crack and cocaine. She's dating this guy who's like a preacher or pastor or whatever at some like local church. Gets her onto the hard drugs.
Like any good preacher would do.
Yeah, exactly right. Yeah. So I knew
Thinking the same thing.
Yeah, this guy was a total piece of shit. I knew him as soon as I saw the guy. I knew he was trouble. When you're young and you've been around a bunch of bullshit, you learn to read people really quick, and that's what I could do. And I knew it was trouble. We end up going to this other house. We're living in this little shitty house, and it's kind of crazy. I had a hardwood floor in my bedroom, and all the floor was buckled all the way across. So hardwood floors, if they're exposed to weather, they'll actually buckle up and crack and split. And it feels like it hurts to walk across the shit, So the reason why that was happening was because in my bedroom, up in the corner of my ceiling, I had a hole that was like 2 feet wide, give or take, and about 4 feet deep. Like the entire corner of my ceiling was missing out of my bedroom. You could see into the attic above. And my mom, like without hesitation, puts me up in this room, little like 3-4 inch mattress, thin little blanket, and I'm up there every night freezing my ass off. This is Ohio, and it would rain and the water literally comes straight into my room. So we put a plastic tarp up, but it was just like, oh my God, I can't imagine putting my kids in a bedroom like that,
Right. That would be the bedroom I would sleep in.
Yeah, exactly. That's and my mom slept in the living room, like nice and warm in the living room. She's fine.
Yeah.
And and so it just blew my mind that I was up there. And that's when I really started getting like the suicidal ideations at around 10 years old or so, because I was just tired of my home life. And at that point, we were seeing so much drugs coming out of the house, like the crack and the coke heads coming in and out. And we had this bathroom in the back of the house. they would literally come in the house, walk straight to the back, and just start getting high. And during the summer, it was worse because I wasn't at school all day, you know. So if I'm at home most of the day, you just see these people nonstop. And they'd be in the bathroom for 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 hours at a time. It was insane. And our bathroom was not big, you know, but it just blew my mind as a young man to like see this. And I was really scared at this time. And I pissed the bed every night. We just didn't have a lot of food. It was just bad, right? So that's one side of the street that I was living on. And the other side was going to this guy's house, you know. And within about 3 months of knowing him, I think it was about the first time he touched me. You know, started molesting me. So
leading up to the touching,
yeah.
How did he normalize certain things to you?
Yeah. So
was it verbiage? Was it movies? Was it?
It was. He's good. I'll tell you that. He's very good at what he did. Yeah. He's very calculated, very strategic.
They work their game.
Yeah. And the thing I'll give him is that he's very patient. He's very, very patient. So what happened was about 3 months or so living or going up to his house every weekend. At some point, it became normal for me to sit on his lap. I don't really know when that happened. All I can remember is the first time he touched me. But I was sitting in his lap, and Jacob was there, and Jacob goes down the street to go get some tacos. And I'm sitting in his lap, and I remember sitting on his left knee. He was real big. You know, he had this chair we'd always sit in together. And he had his left hand on my left hip, and his hand drops down and brushes my butt. And he says, "I'm sorry." And just like if me and you bumped in the hallway, I'm like, "Man, not a big deal." And so he puts his hand on my ass, and he grabs me, and he says, "So this is okay." And as soon as he did that, even at 10 years old, I was like, all right, here we go. Like, we're about to do this. You know, I kind of felt like the best way I can describe this is at the top of the roller coaster. I had finally hit my last click. And as soon as he grabbed me, I'm like looking down now, like, oh, we're about to do this, huh?
We're about to go.
Yep. And so he puts his hand on my butt, and he holds it there, and he's like, "So this is okay?" I'm like, "Yeah, whatever." And, you know, he probably had the next like 6 years of my life or 20 years of my life planned out right then and there.
The key component to any law enforcement officer being the best version of themselves is through education. Sherrie Allsup is a leader in providing that education to police agencies, preparing them for the all too frequent dealings with sexual assault victims.
You've seen Sherrie on episode 169 of the Suffering Podcast. She survived incest and almost daily sexual assault, so she comes from a place of experience and true understanding.
Sherrie has the intelligence, commitment, and compassion to open the eyes of those on the front lines, while providing the tools to effectively deal with a difficult situation. Sherrie's instruction comes from experience and multiple certifications.
Training with Sherrie will offer on-site training, customized schedules, specialized instruction tailored from a victim's perspective.
You are going to hear Sherrie's heart-wrenching but inspiring survivor story. Learn proprietary trauma-informed training techniques, uncovered victim-centered interview methods while earning continuing education credits according to your state guidelines. To be the best, you must learn from the best. Let Sherrie also guide you through the delicate cases of sexual assault from a victim's point of view.
Be a source of comfort to those victims affected by these traumatic experiences while producing a solid investigation and uncovering details that often go unnoticed.
To find out more or to contact Sherrie Allsup, go to sherrieallsup.com. That's SherrieAllsup.com.
It's really sad to think about like the amount of effort that you put in just to do this to a young child.
So looking back, if he would have put his hand on your ass and you react a certain way, he would know that either he has to take a different route or this is a no-go situation.
Move on to the next one.
And from your perspective, being 10, 11 years old, you have this paradise that you have found and you don't want to lose this paradise. So I got to put up with some minor inconveniences in your mind, because there's plenty of people that are going to come up to you and say, well, why didn't you fight back? Which is the worst thing you could possibly say to somebody, because, gee, why didn't I fucking think of that? To fight back.
Oh, geez, that's a new concept to me.
That's a great fucking idea, you asshole.
Yeah.
You know?
But was it that the whole arrangement that almost made it okay? You know what I'm saying? I mean, because you get to play video games there. You know, he had the TVs, he had the computers and everything. So it's like,
Yeah, you know, I knew it was wrong right away, and I think initially I just froze because I was scared. And then after that, because I accepted it, it's almost like if you make a joke about my mom, and then I'm like, oh, okay, that's funny. And now you've opened that door, and now you
keep
can
doing it.
Yeah, you can make
Yep.
that joke all you want. And instead, I should have just been like, hey, man,
Not cool.
Yeah, I appreciate it, but mom's off limits, right? Yeah. And so when you open the door, it's hard to close it because then you're gonna be like, well, what the hell? You just let me say it last week. Why can't I say it this week? Mm-hmm. And so that's kind of what happened with me, because a lot of people, whenever I hear other people's stories, they always talk about they're able to dissociate, go into a different world, or they're able to put another person in that body for a minute, or they just forget it, and or they have these like different ways of coping. I did not have that at all. Like, I was very present, aware. I knew it was wrong. I was disgusted by it. I never enjoyed any bit of it. And that's, I think, what was so like tormenting on my soul, because I was just like, I hated it, man. I hated it. Like, if another man right now grabs me, I don't like it, because like, I'm a man and you're a man, and that's not how I float.
We're not crossing swords.
Yeah, well, like, we're not doing that, right? So, and that's how I felt then too. I'm like, dude, like, this is not okay. But it was just happening to me. And once he touched me that first time, Jacob gets back. Obviously, he moves his hand. But then from there on, I mean, it was like a caged dog, and just like with a bowl of food in front of him. It just
Now he's got a little toy.
Yep.
Yeah.
And so I'm going home once again, dealing with my mom, going back. Boom, we're doing this for a couple years. And about 2 years in to him molesting me, and this is happening every single weekend. I've met his mom. I've met his sisters. I've gone to his family events, like Memorial Days, 4th of July's, whatever. Christmases, Thanksgiving, I've been with his family.
Because, hey, the guy's got this little thing, but he's got some really cool shit at his house. I get it. Like, I understand it.
Well, that's what I said. I mean, he's feeding you pizza.
Yep.
You're playing all those video games and everything else. So you almost, you put it in your mind that it's really almost right.
It's the price you have to pay to get
Yes.
some of the good things in life.
Yep.
And again, someone's showing you love.
Yep. And
Because
so
apparently your mom and your dad weren't showing you love. So now you find that love
that's right.
for all the wrong reasons. But
Yeah, and my mom never asked any questions. My dad was obviously never in the picture. And so, yeah, I'm showing up. And what's crazy too is like, I want to meet his family today. I knew them then, but I'd like to talk to him today and just ask him like what the hell, like not in an accusation way, but just like, what were y'all thinking? Like, what's going on?
did they know?
I don't know how you don't. When your 30-year-old brother is showing up with a 10-year-old boy that looks like a girl, because I had hair like down to my shoulders. I did look like a girl. As a matter of fact, his mom told me I was too pretty to be a boy. And when he would molest me, he would say that to me. He would talk about how pretty I was and like, oh, you're too pretty to be a boy. And it was real disgusting. Like, a lot of the time, so I say all that because I knew his family, I knew everybody. And then we'd go back to his house. And as the time went on for the next, couple of years, it went from being like 70-30 or 80-20 video games to molestation to slowly just, as soon as I got into the house, a couple hours in, it'd be 6, because he would pick me up Friday after school, right? So I'd get to his house about 4:30, 5 o'clock. By 7, 8 o'clock, he was laying in bed. And what he would do, this is like really haunting. And it's almost like if I was getting called to hell and there's like a bell that's just gonging, right? Boom, boom. What he would do is lay in his bed. And so his bed was in the back left corner of the studio, and it was blocked off by some black sheets hanging from the ceiling. And he would lay there and he would just punch the wall behind him. Boom, boom. And I would be out there playing video games. And that was like my calling, like it's time. And I'm getting chills now.
So you'd have to go into, he was basically ringing the dinner bell.
Yeah.
Yeah, his dinner bell.
And feeling somewhat dutiful, you go back there.
Yeah.
And what happens?
Oh, man. I usually don't get emotional about this.
Listen, it happened to you, it would happen to other people too. And your story is going to help people. So get as emotional as you want, man.
Yeah, so, yeah, the dinner bell analogy is really good. And that's kind of how it was. It's like Pavlov's theory, you ring
Pavlov's dog.
The dog
Yeah.
salivates every time the bell rings, yeah.
And that's kind of what was happening. And the reason why I talk about the salivating specifically is I'll tell you this. I would go back there, right? And I would eventually start sleeping with him every night, in bed. And
So you're staying over there all weekend.
oh yeah, Friday night, Saturday night, and he'd take me home Sunday.
Now, did he make you take your clothes off when you came back?
Initially, it was just a lot of touching, and then it would be putting his hands in my shorts. And I remember all this. I remember how it all feels. I remember his hands were rough. They're very rough. They're very calloused. He had long nails. His knuckles were so rough. As a matter of fact, he would take his fingers and rub them like this, and it would sound like rocks, like rubbing together. That's just how like rough his hands were. So I just remember his like callousy hands touching me. But he would put his hands in my shorts. He would touch my penis, my butt. He would eventually start to like kind of spread my butt to try and put his finger inside of me. And I remember telling him like, it hurts too much. He's like, well, he had some Vaseline next to his bed, this big jar of Vaseline. So he's like, well, what about this? And I said, no, it's like your nail. It hurts. And so like, as a little boy, I'm like trying to like find out how to compromise or like how to like
Get out of it?
I mean, well, what I'm
anything.
I mean, I'm almost like telling him like
I'm on my period,
Yeah, so it's crazy. And so he goes, so I remember the next weekend I came up there, his nail was gone. He gets rid of his whole freaking nail in his middle finger so he can use it on me. And so that starts to happen, right? So he's using his finger. And this is pretty much starts to happen every weekend. And like I said, it goes from a lot of video games to a little bit of sex or molestation to a lot of that versus video games. And but it was very routine. Like I said, he'd go back there, he'd ring the dinner bell. I'd go back to his bed, lay down, and he would talk to me and just say he loved me, and he would talk to me like all these disgusting things that not like sexually disgusting, but just how much he loved me and how much I meant to him. And he couldn't wait till I was 18, so it was legal, and we wouldn't have to hide this anymore. And the salivating part, this is why I talk about that. So the first time he makes me touch him, I didn't understand this at the time. I didn't understand this for a long time because I didn't know what the hell it was. But I remember he's like, well, why don't you touch me? And I'm like, I don't want to do this shit at all. Like, I don't feel guilty about like returning the favor or anything. I'm like, no, like I'm not doing this shit. And he eventually convinces me, and so I put my hand in his shorts, and he's wearing underwear, but his underwear is soaked. And I'm like, dude, is this guy like pissing himself?
Pissing himself, yeah.
Yeah, I'm like, what the fuck? And, he's like having me touch him. And as I grew into an adult, maybe 10 years later from this point, because I still didn't know what it was because it's never happened to me, but the guy would have so much like pre-ejaculate, his underwear were literally soaked. So just think about that. Like this 30-year-old man is so horny or so like dying to have sex with a little kid that his underwear are soaked, and he's like about to, ejaculate without even doing anything. Like that's like the amount of fantasy that is going through his head.
But it's less about the sex. It's more about he's molding the perfect partner for him.
Yeah.
That's what he's doing.
Yeah. God, it just disgusts me now. Like every time I think about this now, it's just like.
Well, how did it progress? So it eventually progressed to the worst of the worst. Did it start with oral?
Yep.
It started with oral.
Yep. Yeah. So it was all hands, and then it went to oral. And at around 11 or 12 years old, I think I was about 12. That oral sex was just like nonstop. It was every weekend, reciprocating oral sex. He would do it, I would do it. He would do it, I would do it, and it was just every weekend. And then,
did you ever feel guilty about enjoying it?
Yeah. So the first, I don't know if maybe guilt is the right word. I'm not sure. I was very confused.
I've heard this before. That's why I'm asking.
Yeah. Yep. So what really was weird was that the first orgasm I ever had was with this grown man, right? And I remember I have this orgasm, and he looks up at me, and he's like real proud of himself, and he's like, "Did you enjoy that?" And I'm like, "What am I gonna say? No, I just had an orgasm." You know what I'm saying? Like, what am I supposed to say?
Yeah, they're pretty fucking awesome.
Yeah. So like,
it was pretty cool.
Right. And so I'm like, I don't even know I mean, I know what happened, but I'm like.
So Andrew, not to make light of this, but Andrew Dice Clay puts that perfectly. When you're 5 years old or 6-year-old, 7-year-old, when you start playing with yourself and the little goose shots, and he goes, "Oh shit, I fucking broke it." Yeah. You can't even comprehend it because you don't have that base.
You don't know what's going on at that point, but just know it feels good, and it doesn't feel right, but it feels good.
So what was I knew what was happening because my mom she had exposed us to porn really quick.
Oh God.
And so like when I was like 5, around the first time I got molested, we had found her porn stash, right? And by the time I was like 10, she knew that I was watching porn from her porn stash. So she just gave me a DVD and said, you can watch it whenever you want. So like, at 10 years old, I was watching porn as much as I wanted.
Well, your governor had to be broken by the time you're 12.
Dude.
You know, like you need something extra, and that's what happens.
Dude, I was...
Was it like straight porn or was it?
Yeah, it was all straight porn, yeah. Yeah, so like I was like very aware. I knew everything. I tried to have sex with a girl when I was like 5 or 6 in my closet. You know, my mom kind of walks in and this girl is probably like, what the fuck's this kid doing? But anyways, so yeah, we go, oral sex happens, right? And so when I was 12, my mom gets taken away from me. I was at my neighbor's house one day, and oddly enough, we were watching the old show Intervention. And at the end of every episode, they talk about if you have somebody, you can contact us here, right? And so we're looking at my neighbor, and we're like, oh, we know somebody. And we're thinking about getting our mom on this show. Like, maybe this will help her. Because we had already, well, actually, I had addressed her at 12 years old. I addressed her, and I asked her, are you using crack? Are you using cocaine? And she yelled at me and screamed at me, which I think was really brave of me to do, considering most people won't even tell somebody that I don't like the way you did this, you know?
You don't even have the wherewithal at 12, 13 years old to...
Yeah, so I asked her, like, all these questions. She's like, no, like, fuck you. I'm not doing any drugs. Mind your fucking business. And she was so freaking high. She had a broken foot, and she was walking around on it. So, anyways, my mom, we walk outside. We're at my neighbor's house watching the show. We walk outside, and there's a fire in our front yard. And so we're immediately hysterical. We know something bad has happened. Her boyfriend comes out next. He's got blood on his shirt. Turns out she like stabbed him or attacked him in the bathroom, probably over some drugs. And my mom is like running around yelling and screaming. Cop shows up, throws her in the back of the car. I'm sitting here looking at my mom. She's in the back of the car. I remember being in the street, and it feels like there was like a third person like camera over top of me. And it just felt like, you know, my mom was about to be taken away from me, and she's telling me she loved me and she'll be back and all this. And so
It's probably the best thing that could ever happen.
it was
In hindsight?
in hindsight, absolutely. But at that moment, I mean,
Your world's ending.
dude, my world is over, and I'm just like absolutely terrified. My blood, it feels like my blood is leaving my body, and I just feel like this is how I describe death. I think this is probably what death feels like. It just felt like my blood was leaving my soul, and I had nothing left of me. I mean, I felt freezing cold in a hot summer day, you know, around lunchtime. You know, it was just miserable experience.
But I mean, your house wasn't a safe spot for you. Now you got
Right.
this. Now you got this other place that you're going to,
Yeah,
which doesn't feel like a safe spot for you anymore either.
right.
I mean, you had talked about suicidal
Yep.
ideologies and everything. Did that creep in again at
Oh,
this point?
it was daily. This was like a daily occurrence. Suicide was so normal for me at this point that it's like as simple as me picking up and drinking this bottle of tea. I was just like, I could just kill myself.
You never committed suicide though, right?
Never did it. Yeah, never did it. Never attempted it. I tried the typical kid thing, trying to suffocate myself with a pillow, but I just wanted to die. You know, I remember sitting outside my window. I would sit on my window ledge like, man, that's like a 20-foot drop. If I do it just right, I'll die. If I just land on my head.
But there's always that thing in the back of your head. But if I do it wrong, it's gonna fucking hurt.
Dude, that's no shit what stopped me from killing myself.
I know.
'Cause
Trust me, I know.
Yeah, so like if I fuck this up,
You'd be paralyzed. You have to worry about someone taking care of you the rest of your life.
yeah, man, like you can't fuck up suicide, man, because now you're going to get made fun of for fucking up suicide, and you're going to be hurting. Like that's just a bad way to go. So, anyways, my mom gets taken away from me, and for the next 4 months, I was kind of bouncing around living with random people, family, friends, and all this stuff.
And you're separated from Mr. Vasquez. At this point.
No. During this time, basically, I was keeping tabs with him, and he was with me as well, and he would just come and pick me up wherever I was at. Yeah. So, mom's gone. I'm bouncing around. This whole time, I'm like a straight A student. Schools have no idea what's going on. At least I think. I don't know. And I'm just like class clown, straight A student showing up, knocking it out. And
Great actor.
yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah. Well, yeah. My mom, I kind of, this is another jacked up thing, is that for so long, it was always like, what happens in our house stays in our house. Because if you tell anybody, they'll take you from me.
Yeah.
Right. And so
That's the old scare tactic.
exactly. Right. And so now, you know, I've gotten into that relationship with Mondo as well. We called him Mondo. and where you didn't say anything to anybody, because what's going to happen? Like, what happens if he doesn't get arrested? What happens if he doesn't get in trouble? Well, now he knows where I live. Now he's going to come and kill me, right?
So I'm sure this has progressed to
Yep.
finally sex.
Yep.
And how long did this go on for?
Yeah, so he raped me for the first time at 13, and right about that time was when my grandparents adopted me. And so when I got to my grandparents' house, I was still going to his house. My grandma knew I was molested at 5, and so she was like, "No, like we're not doing this." But I defended the guy, and so he shows up like it's prom night, walks up to the front door with his best sweatpants and large t-shirt on, he's fucking washed his hair, and he wins my grandparents over. And so for the next 2 years until I was almost 3, I was almost 16 years old. I was a month away from being 16, and at this point, it had been going on for almost 6 years, right? About 5.5 years, give or take. And I get to his house, or I'm up at his house one weekend, and I have a friend with me who's a little bit younger. He's a couple years younger than me. And this guy, he would always make jokes about me, about fucking me to other people. He would say like, "Oh, we're gonna go back and I'm gonna fuck Seth tonight," or "Seth's gonna blow me," and like all these adults would just like laugh around the table as we're playing cards. Or
Yeah, because who would be so brazen to say that?
Exactly.
It's actually perfect cover.
It is.
It's
really
a great
is.
cover.
Yep. Yeah. It's like, yeah, of course I'm cheating on my wife. It's like, so he started making these same jokes about my younger friend. And I was like, the audacity, like, you fucking asshole. Like, you're going to do what you did to me to him right in front of me, And so I was like, nah, man, I can't let this happen. So my friend goes back in the bed with him. That was the first time I ever remember him going to the bed with him. And I was like, can't do it. So playing video games, and Jacob is online. Jacob is the one who introduced me to him, right? And I messaged Jacob, and I just said, hey, I need you to come over tomorrow. I got to talk to you. So he comes over the next day. Mondo drops us off. Jacob shows up, and we talk for a little bit, but then I'm in my bedroom, and I'm pacing back and forth, and I'm like, hey, I got to tell you something. I don't know how to tell you. And this goes on for like 15 minutes. I'm just like, I can't say the words. They cannot come out of my body. And out of nowhere, Jacob just says, he touched you, didn't he? And I turn, look at him, and I fall to the floor, right? Break down crying. Same feeling I had when my mom was taken away from me. Same feeling again, just this like deathly feeling. I felt like I was melting. And the next thing he says to me is, he did it to me too.
Well, that's what I was going to say. Did Jacob bring you into the picture to get Mondo off of you, and now you're the next victim is really what it comes down to.
So looking back on it, I didn't know what was happening at the time, but Jacob and I have recently sat down, and about a month ago now, and talked about all this, and he was clueless. He thought it stopped with him, and he had no idea that it was happening to anybody else. Truly, he was clueless. And
I thought I was special.
yeah, exactly. Yeah. And I was the same way, right? I had no idea. And what makes matters worse is if you have an older brother in your life, or if you have a father or another man that you really look up to, there's nothing that can happen to that guy, right? Like, he's like undefeatable. Like, he's just like this fucking stoic man. Yep. Can't touch him. And so when that happened to Jacob, I was just torn apart because he was my protector. He was the one who held me and helped me for so many years. And so to hear that was crazy. So we go out, we tell my grandparents, and so this is, like I said, about a month before I turned 16. And so it went on from 10 to 16, basically. And we tell my grandparents, we call 911, go to the hospital, and cop shows up. I actually got to meet the cop again, which was really cool. Got to hear his side of the story, which was like mind-blowing.
Yeah, it blows your mind.
Oh,
yeah,
dude, it just
absolutely.
opened up so many. It was crazy. I'm actually working on getting the footage from that interrogation. Anyways, so he shows up, and what was crazy was his last name, and I noticed it, and his wife was my teacher when I had first started getting molested, which was like, oh. So anyways, we're at the hospital, and they're like, well, how are we going to get this guy? Like, we got to have something to get him. Otherwise, we can't just go in there, and we got to have some sort of hard evidence, you know?
What are you going to do, like a rape kit, right?
Yeah.
Well, if it's too far gone, he hasn't, unless he's done it recently.
Done it recently.
Yes.
They could tell trauma, but they can't.
Yeah, so he had raped me that weekend, and I talk about this part a lot because the nurses, I remember them being so proud of me because he had raped me that weekend. And I went home that Sunday, and I knew I couldn't take a shower. I knew I couldn't take my clothes off. I was like, I'm going to fucking get this guy. And so I knew what I needed to do. I had seen enough of, like, Law and Order to know, you know? And so we get to the hospital, and I'm like, no. You can test me. he raped me this weekend. I've got all my clothes on. I guarantee it's on me. And they were just like blown away. I mean, they were just like, holy shit. And they're like, boom. They take my clothes off to test me. They find his DNA. I tell the cop all this like nasty shit that happened to me, like really nasty shit. And that was the cop goes up and arrests him that night. Basically, they get him to admit. The only thing he admits initially was that I had performed fellatio on him. That was it.
But you have his DNA all over you.
Oh yeah.
Right, you didn't spit it up your ass.
Right. Exactly.
exactly.
Yeah. And I tell the cop too that there's a jar of Vaseline and there's a towel next to his bed from where he cleaned me up. And they go up there and they find it, you know. And so, case is done. Like they got his ass. Yeah. And so a month or two later, I find out he pleads guilty to like 10 charges. He gets 10 years in prison. That was in 2011.
10 years.
10 years. And he had, between me and Jacob, at least 10 years of pleasure between two boys.
So here's the sad part. Here's how broken our criminal justice system is. Guy gets 10 years for raping minors.
Yeah.
Yep.
For raping anybody, but minors especially.
Two minors.
Two minors, and possibly a third.
Possibly a third. And how many more were there?
Then you have somebody like Seth Ferranti, right? Seth is a friend of ours. He's a movie director. Seth got caught with no LSD. He sold LSD. He'll tell you he sold it. He got 25 years, did 21. 25 years. First time nonviolent offender. That's nuts.
Yeah.
And listen, I'm not saying what Seth did, and Seth will tell you he didn't do anything right, but he gets 25 years. This guy gets 10 years. This is a broken system.
It's a broken system.
You know what's crazy too? When I interviewed the cop in Ohio, it's not rape unless they're under 13. And because of the state of the situation that was happening, we couldn't narrow down a timeline. You know, I think I was probably hiding back or holding back a little bit. So it wasn't even rape. It was unlawful sexual misconduct with a minor.
Unlawful carnal knowledge.
Yeah. Some weird
For
shit.
unlawful carnal knowledge.
You know, because it happened when I was 13 or 14 versus 12. You know, that like it's fucked up. So, anyways, the guy would be free today, right? Which is the scary part of the story, right? Fortunately enough, he died in 2019. So I'm glad he got to serve a full term. He had pled for parole or whatever you do, and it was denied. And then he died like a month or two later.
Well, there's a special place in hell for him.
Died in prison.
Yeah.
Good.
Yep.
There's a special place in hell.
There's a special place in prison for those people too.
Well, now
because they generally get their ass beat once they find out. Listen, criminals are criminals.
Yeah.
But when they find out that you're doing something sexually to a minor,
yeah, because they all got daughters.
You become a different brand of criminal.
They all get daughters and sons, and they do love their children. And yeah, there's a little bit of jailhouse justice.
I've heard that there are so many pedophiles that are incarcerated now that they have their own division.
Avenel.
Oh.
So Avenel Prison in South Jersey is where they put them all.
Okay.
Listen, I went to high school with two guys that are in there.
Yeah.
But no, Kevin, isn't it like a smorgasbord for them though?
No, because they're around each other, so
right.
they don't.
They swap stories.
So it's not. So what I know about child sexual assault is it's not about the sex as much as it is about
the dominance,
the power.
Sure.
It's I'm sure it was sexually gratifying for him. Don't get me wrong, but that's what I understand about it. It's the thrill. It's all that stuff. That's what excited me, because I guarantee you, when you got too old, you were going to be pushed by the wayside.
Sure.
You just weren't his cup of tea anymore.
Well, that's why you said when you brought the younger friend around, that's why you started bringing your younger friend.
And again,
that's why Jacob started it, and then you came in. Yeah. And then you brought your younger friend in.
The things that come out of my mouth are all my opinion.
Sure.
Obviously, I'm not a therapist, I'm not a doctor. I'm looking at your situation and I'm like, man, you know what? You went through a lot of horror, but you came out on the other side.
We talked about it before, resiliency.
So what are he goes to jail. What are your after effects? What are your long-term effects?
Initially, I was fine. Like, I was like, the biggest thing that happened initially was like I didn't have any plans the next weekend. I was like, what the fuck am I going to do now? Like, I don't...
Not get raped.
Yeah.
That's number one.
Yeah, so, like, I did start to hang out with friends from school a lot more, which is cool. The effects of it, though, were every girl that I talked to, it was very, very sexually motivated. Every single girl I talked to, I just wanted to have sex with them all. And I wasn't, at least I don't think I was looking for any kind of justice or verification to myself. I was just like, man, like, I really want to have sex. Like, I got to the point where, like, I would take a girl on a date and I'd say, okay, well, now we're going to go back and have sex. Like, we just met a couple hours ago and now it's time to have sex.
Knock on the wall.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Ring the dinner bell.
Yeah. So it was like, I didn't realize it at the time how bad it was. Looking back on it, I do know that I was definitely not okay.
Well, my opinion with that one is there's two reasons. Number one, you think any affection is is shown through sex, or you were either trying to prove your masculinity.
Yeah, and it was
that's what I was gonna say.
probably a combination of them. I certainly did want to prove my masculinity. Because over all these years, you're in the back of the bus because this is all happening while I'm in school. So on the back of the bus, the guys are talking about what girl they kissed or what girl they touched, and I'm like, every weekend, I'm like, So, so yeah, there was probably a combination of that. Yeah, so when I got older, the long-term effects now are just general intimacy. So I'm working on it now with my wife. I've kind of told myself, like, I need to do this now. I need to be more intimate with my wife. And the biggest thing for me is like PDA, like public display of affection. For some reason, it makes my freaking skin crawl. And I feel like I'm being watched. There was a time, one time my wife had looked at my kids and said, they're like, hey guys, look. And then she gave me a kiss, just kind of show her affection in front of the kids, I guess. And for some, it wasn't weird, but to me, it was just like,
We don't do that in front of the kids.
Yeah, it was just like this feeling that somebody was watching me enjoy, pleasure.
Do you understand that you've been closed off? If you look back at your life, what happens in the house stays in the house. What happens in Mondo's house stays in Mondo's house. Now, all of a sudden, your wife, who seems like she's normal and well-adjusted, is trying to act normally, but it's just total abnormal behavior.
Yeah, man. Holding hands in public, it just, oh, man. So I'm working on it now.
I was going to say, do you think she's trying to help you out in this now?
I think so. And I think for so long, we've been married for 7 years, I think now, 7 or 8 years.
Oh, no, get it right.
Yeah, I know.
She's going to watch this. You better
tattooed on you. That's what I do right here.
Yeah, that's not a bad idea. Yeah. We've been married long enough that...
there you go. Good idea.
That I should be, or I say I should be. I think that since we have been married, she has tried to reach me. And I think my pride and ego has gotten in the way so much where she has tried to help me, and instead of me accepting the help, I'm just like, you don't fucking understand me.
Exactly. But you were just about to say something and you cut yourself off. You should be over it. You're never going to be over it. You never.
Right.
It's always going to be in your mind. So it's always going to be in your mind.
It's part of you.
It's part of you.
Yeah.
Listen, and it's part of who you are today.
Yeah.
And listen, you're still here. You're laughing. You're breathing.
And you're going out and talking about it.
You're going out and talking about it. You're helping other people out. It's part of who you are. Don't ever say you should be over it because you're never going to be over it.
Yeah.
Believe me, you're not.
No.
I mean, I don't want to rain on your parade.
Yeah.
You're never going to be over. This is part of who you are. This is part of your upbringing.
Yeah.
So the one
Use it to help other people.
Right.
So the one thing that I want to talk to you about, because we're getting near the end here, you were molested as a child. Did you ever have those come around you and say, well, you were molested, and most molesters were molested as children? That fear of people having their children around you, especially now that you're starting to come out with all this stuff?
I had like a YouTube person say something one time, which I thought was that. I mean, I laugh at those comments. He said, if you ever get those feelings, you know what you need to do. I'm like, well, kill myself? Oh, okay, whatever. So that was kind of funny. I don't think that the people around me, most of the people don't talk about it. They don't even want to bring it up. They just act like I'm not talking about this, which is kind of funny.
Let's avoid it.
Yeah, let's just, and I get it. It's not something,
The pink elephant in the room?
Yeah. When people ask me, like, oh, why are you going to New Jersey? Like on the plane, I'm like, well, I'm a motivational speaker. Well, what happened? Well, you really want me to ruin your day right now? So like, I get it. I don't want to ruin anybody's day.
Unfortunately, I got motivated.
It all started with a video game.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Well, there was this guy.
Yeah. So
when people ask you, well, how'd you get in touch with this person? Well, it all started with a trans person. Yeah. And then it'll jump off from there. And I swear to God, and you'll see people go, all right, well, I don't really want to know the rest.
Yeah. So it gets kind of heavy really quick. So people have not approached me about it yet, but it's only been 3 months. I've only been talking about this now for 3 months. Yeah. So this is all like really fast. When those conversations do come up, I don't know how I'll handle them. I had a really good question asked of like, what are my kids going to do when in 10 years from now somebody finds out their dad was raped, you know. And we'll handle that when we get there. My job is to raise 2 good, resilient children that can handle that shit.
Hey, man, dude. Apparently, I don't know you as a father, but apparently you're doing a good job, man. Keep up the good work.
So I know you're writing a book.
Yep.
So what else you got going on now?
So writing the book, that'll be out later this year. Looking at like September, October, November timeframe to publish. Tentative name is Strength Beyond the Shadows, hence the Instagram name, which is Go Beyond the Shadows. I've built a website, which is sethgehle.com. That's kind of my platform right now. Not really being used a whole lot, but if somebody wants to Google me, they can at least Google me and find me.
It's Gehle.
Yep.
Gale.
Yep. Gehle. And then the motivational speaking career is kind of kicking off. So I'm doing the best that I can to network and to find gigs. I've done a handful of them for different reasons. Nothing really what I've kind of talked about. I did them for construction stuff, but I recently spoke at the University of North Georgia. Spoke to a bunch of high school students. That was really cool. Spoke to like 45 kids. Like 6 of them came up to me crying afterwards, like looking for help and healing, right? Which was incredibly powerful. But it's just a testament. Out of 45 kids, if 6 of them come up to me, imagine what'll happen if I talk to 1,000 of them. You know,
Exactly.
If everything, I touch all the bases. Single parent, no father, drugs. I mean, I'm the freaking multi-tool of like this childhood trauma that you can have.
And
You are the epitome of childhood trauma.
And you are also the poster child for what a predator looks for.
Yeah, exactly. I checked all the boxes, you know.
Yes,
so
you did.
I was the perfect victim. And then I'm speaking at the Children's Hope and Healing Center. They selected me as their keynote speaker for their 40th annual gala in August. That'll be down in Gainesville, Georgia. So I'm super excited about that. Get up there and hopefully advocate for children.
Well, you have to be that same person you were right before you turned 16, where you finally blew the whistle on all this stuff because you didn't want anybody else to go through what you went through.
Yeah, I think if as a young man somebody would have came in and said something at school, like, because what happened to me in school, right, was people would come in and talk and they'd say, hey, if this is happening, you need to do something, this, that, the other. But it's like, you don't fucking know me, and you're telling me I can do this and get through this and be this great person in life, but you've not experienced what I've experienced. So how the hell can you tell me?
So now going out and giving those speeches, someone knows, one of those kids knows that someone else has been through it.
Yeah.
And that's what's so special about you and special about your story.
It makes you more approachable, right?
Yep.
If you tell me you're from Ohio, I'm like, dude, I'm from Ohio. Like, let's go, man. Like, we're best friends now, right? So, like, it's just that relatability that opens up that conversation to let these kids heal.
But, if he went up to someone and said, I'm a Browns fan, there's no other Browns fans in the world.
Yeah, you're alone.
So you're alone on that one.
Well, exactly. And
Do they still have a team?
but that's a great point, because I was like that Browns fan in the classroom, right? Like, nobody else is a Browns fan. Like, nobody knows. Nobody wants to talk to me. Like, they really don't want to know what's going on, you know?
Lesson learned, don't be a Browns fan.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So we're coming to
Write that down, Kev. Don't be a Browns fan.
we're coming to the end of this thing. Before we get to our last point here, just give out your social media again.
Yep. So my Instagram is Go Beyond the Shadows.
We'll put links to everything.
Yep.
Up.
Absolutely.
And then, if you just look up my name, you'll find it too, Seth Gehle, and last name is Gehle. You Google me, you'll find me. I've got enough podcasts and Instagram shit out there now that you can find me. So
we end every show the same way. You've gone through this kind of life of horror to get to where you are now. And your suffering has had to teach you something. If not, it's a really wasted opportunity. I'd love to know what your suffering has taught you.
Suffering creates endurance. So it's funny you talked about the Bible in the beginning of this. I'm not a religious man, but I do love the Bible for the morals and ethics and lessons that you can learn from it. I listened to 2 great ones this morning, but one of them talks about suffering and suffering creating endurance, and endurance creates character, right? The more you suffer, the more you can endure. The more you can endure, the better your character generally is, or it can be. And then a strong character creates hope and inspires hope in men, right? So through all this suffering, I've become an incredibly and resilient and enduring person. I can do anything in this world because I've already been through the worst shit you can go through. There's nothing you can tell me. I can do it all. Okay.
Someone tells you some kind of suffering, you're like, Check.
Yeah.
I did that.
Yeah,
I did that before.
Exactly. And so now my goal now is I'm at this character point where I've built into this man that I can hopefully inspire others. And I do that through the things that I do in my daily life, right? Which is just being a good father, husband, athlete. I try to challenge myself with jiu-jitsu, competing, running ultra marathons, like doing this hard shit. And when people see like, oh, he ran 60 miles, and then they find out my backstory, they're like, holy shit. Like,
Well, the 60 miles is easy.
yeah, exactly.
Yeah, compared to what you've been
and that's what I tell people. I'm like, look, man, you would be you don't understand your potential. You don't understand. It's just like in Can't Hurt Me. You know, David Goggins talks about it. When I ran my 50 miler, I was looking for like the epiphany of life. I was like, this is going to break me and this is going to be it. And it wasn't. I was not even close. And so I kept challenging myself. And next month I'm running a 48-hour race. I'm going to try and do as many miles as I can. But that suffering, like I said, it just creates that endurance. The endurance is character to inspire hope. And if there's one thing in this world I can do at this point with all the shit that I've been through, is to show others there's a light at the end of the tunnel. I've won national construction awards. I've been on fucking Vegas speaking on a stage to millionaires, and these people are looking at me like I'm this like perfect guy, and I'm like, you guys have no clue what it took to get here.
You got no fucking clue. What
No
I've been
idea,
through.
you know.
But yeah, I mean, you brought up inspire. You are inspiring, Seth. You definitely are inspiring.
Well, I'm looking forward to where you're going in the future
Yeah.
because you're owning your stuff and you're bringing it to light, and I think you're going to change some minds. But I really do appreciate you.
I appreciate you guys, man.
Appreciate you
It
coming
means
all the way
more.
up, man.
Yeah.
Like I said, your story is going to help people.
Thank you.
And that's going to do it for this episode of the Suffering Podcast, the suffering of fighting back with Seth Gehle. And let's think about all the stuff that we learned. Justice isn't as important as healing. Predators know exactly what they're doing. When bad is normal, bad leaving feels awful. Wounds heal, scars remain. Make sure trauma doesn't repeat, but the most important thing is to endure. And that's going to do it for this episode. Don't forget to go to 234 Franklin Avenue in Nutley, New Jersey. Go see Gus over at Cubita Cafe, some of the best food you'll ever have. Go to popple.com, put in the code TSP20 for a 20% discount on your digital business card. Follow us on all social media. That's LinkedIn, Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, Clapper.
Don't even fucking go there after this one. I'm not touching it.
That was a layup. Follow Mike at Mike_Failace. Follow me at Real Kevin Donaldson. And, of course, follow the Suffering Podcast. We're going to see you on the next episode.